Alright YouTube, how's it going? Welcome back to the channel. Today guys, we're gonna do a tier list. So every end of the month, I will do a tier list based on the new selection pack that was added into Master Duel in the earlier week of the month. With that, I will categorize them or categorize the new decks that garner the new supports. So without further ado, let's start. First deck that we're gonna talk about is Branded Espia. So without a doubt, Branded Espia is still a really good deck. I think this is still a really good S tier deck at best. Even though Branded Fusion was semi-limited to 2 copies, Branded Opening to 2, and even Labyrinth to 2, it is still one of the best Fusion decks. And with the new supports from last month of the Bestials, the Cartesia, Super Poly was on 3 copies, yikes. And then with the new Fusion monsters, of course, the Garura, the Dust Dragon, and so on and so forth, the Striking Dragon as well, it got branded into a spot wherein it's really unbeatable sometimes. Also, I think they're still lacking some other branded supports, but even so with the current ones, it's still really broken. Then we have Adamantimators. So Adamantimators, I'm going to put this one on A tier. The reason for this is that majority of the people already know the choke points or one of the choke points for Adamantimators. Like for example, a Gallant Granite Search, you'll stop that. Just remove their Block Dragon majority or 50% of the time. They can't do anything else, and majority of the time they can't retrieve the Block Dragon once, or any monsters for that matter, once they are banished. Also, having to drop a copy of Maxi is somewhat detrimental for an Adamantimator deck, but one thing also is the pros for the deck, having a ton of cards that garner you more resources from the deck. Also, they are Earth attribute monsters, so they won't be really good targets for visual monsters. I think majority of the people nowadays add like only a minimum of Magnemite and Drewsworm into their decks as one of the engines. So I think that won't do good against an Adamantimator deck. Then we have Dark Worlds. So Dark Worlds, I'm going to put this one B tier. So the reason for this is because I've tried using Dark Worlds with Branded. They are okay, I would say, if you're going to use them for Branded. But I think the best archetype to play the Dark Worlds in is with the Dangers. But the downside for that, and that's one of the reasons why I put this one in the B tier category, is because having to rely on RNG every time you use the effect of a danger monster is not a really good win condition for any type of deck. That goes also with dice rolls and coin flips. But if ever you manage to pull off like not hitting your danger monsters during their effects, I think you'll garner a ton of resources for that matter. Also, you can eventually deck your opponent out if ever they drop a copy of Maxi as well. Then we have Dragon Links. So Dragon Links, I'm going to put this one in A tier, or possibly S tier. No, I'm going to put this one in A tier. I have explanation for this. So if ever you have an average experience for a Dragon Link deck, I think this would actually be okay. Because I think the minimum is an average knowledge on how you play the deck. Because basically, you'll tend to go into like 2 or 3 monsters on the field that can interrupt your opponent during their turn. But worst case scenario, if ever you'll be interrupted, you'll basically have 1 or 2 interruptions during your opponent's turn. But I think that's one thing there for Dragon Links to be more lackluster, is because you tend to remove a ton of resources from your deck just to have like 1 or 2 or even 3 negates on the board during your opponent's turn. But correct me if I'm wrong, I've seen some other Dragon Link players that are really good with the deck. They can even win after a whole board wipe under a Maxi and having their boss monster removed out of play. So I think it really depends on the player using this type of deck. So I'm going to put this one on A tier. And then we have Exo Sisters. So Exo Sisters, I'm going to put this one on still A tier. They are still a really good deck. They are good against tier elements as well. Well, majority of the decks, they are still good. They don't really use the graveyard that much, so that's why they have Dimension Shifter. And Shifter is actually a win con nowadays. If ever you drop that to the graveyard, it's basically a 50-50 chance that it is a tier elements deck that you're going up against, and they'll immediately scoop. Having to stop your opponent from removing cards from the graveyard is one key thing that an Exo Sister deck can do, and eventually going into a Zeus play if ever worst comes to worst. Alright, so the next deck that we're going to talk about is Floowandereeze. So I'm going to put Floowandereeze on S tier here. I know, it's a shocker, but yeah, hear me out. So the reason I put this one on S tier is because with the current state of Master Duel we're in, Bestials are still on, Branded Espias, Tier Elements are still on. I think Floanderis is a really good S tier deck. They got Map on 1, Empen on 1, Barrier Statue was banned, Terraforming was banned. Majority of the pot cards was either semi-limited or limited, having to rely mostly with their arsenal. Make them a really good deck as well. They are still a really good deck to play on. And of course, they don't rely mostly in the graveyard. If ever you drop a maxi, they just play through that. Doesn't really matter for them. One of their win cons is also a shifter. A dropping of shifter immediately wins them some of the games. Then we have For Hire. Why am I putting For Hire here? But For Hire is a copium deck. If you're just gonna play this mainly on its own archetype, it is a copium deck. But if ever you're gonna put this one with or add this one on Runex or even Sprites, I think this is gonna be roughly an 8-tier deck at best. But yeah, if purely For Hire, copium. Then we have Heroes. I am gonna put this one on S tier, and I think yeah, hero players rejoice, blah blah blah. I think Heroes are still a really strong deck even for today. So if ever they're going first and they know immediately that they are going up against this specific type of deck, they'll change their playstyle that revolves around negating those monsters or negating the whole deck entirely. So if ever they are up against tier elements, just summon the Dark Claw on the field. If ever they have or they're going up against monsters that have a ton of field presence, they immediately summon Plasma to the field. That is really insane for a type of hero deck. Also, you don't want an empty field against a hero player because basically on that turn they have the ability to OTK. The downside for this deck is they can be easily dropped into a maxi or a copy of Nibiru. I've seen some other decks that uses Nibiru nowadays. Then we have our Labyrinth. So Labyrinth is a really good S tier nowadays. So those two cards garnered it a little bit more broken in a sense. So Lady allows you to search out any trap card for that matter during that turn. And if ever you have a copy of Kuklak on hand, you can immediately use that trap card after you have set it. So insanely good. The barrier is still a thing, going up against the fusion monsters as well, like Tier Elements and Brandeds. You have Eradicator Virus just to destroy a trap-based deck or a spell-based deck. So that is really insane for this type of deck as well. Then we have Punks. So Punks, I have been using Punks as well in most of my games nowadays, but I'm gonna put this one on B tier. So it's easy enough to stop a Punk deck during their combo. Also, another downside for this is they don't really have like a really good end board. The best part about Punks is you eventually have a ton of resources to go into, a ton of combos that you can go into. The sad part about this is that you can protect those cards during your opponent's turn. And then we'll have Rika San Avalon. Rika San Avalon is an 8-tier deck at best. Majority of the time I have faced a Rika San Avalon player. They immediately scoop if ever they missed one line. And I think it needs to have perfection for this type of deck, or a ton of experience to make this deck even worth your while. Then we have Runex. So Runex with other archetypes, I think it's gonna be like, I'm gonna put this on B tier. I really don't like Runex, but sorry, B tier. So B tier Runex because purely they're really crappy. But if you're gonna add them into a Sprite or a For Hire deck, I think they're gonna be going into A tier at best. So yeah, next up we have Sprites. So Sprites, basically S tier. I really like Sprites. Majority of your plays just revolves around a copy of Gamma Burst for an OTK as well. Getting more resources out into the field, having a negate of a monster, negate for spell and traps. You always have an out to it. And of course with the Melfies added into your arsenal, you can go into an Arclight, just stopping a tier element deck on its tracks. Or you can go into the Synchro Melfi monster that can bounce a card to the hand. So it's either one of those plays that you can do it. Also, if you have a sprint on the field, you can just target one Exe monster, attach that monster to that specific Exe monster. So it's insanely good. And then we'll have next is Stun decks. So I'm going to put Stun decks on A tier. Now I know, Stun decks on A tier, whatever. But understand this is just reality in the current state of Master Duel. Stun decks are still one of the go-to decks that you can use that is anti-meta. So Floodgates, whatever, Kaijus, Crackdown, anything that just bounces off cards like a Mirror Force, Drowning Mirror Force. It's really annoying, and yeah, most of the players don't really want to go against them, and by far that makes them one of the best decks for currently, but not S tier decks, of course. And then we have Sword Soul. So Sword Soul, I'm gonna put this on A tier. Really good deck. I think they haven't been hit on any ban list whatsoever. They're still really strong though, and just adapt most of your cards into the current meta. I think with a Labyrinth deck, they add 2 copies of Red Reboot if ever you're going up against a trap-based deck or a control-based deck. And then you have tier elements, S tier, no doubt about it. I don't want to explain further about this type of deck. Trap checks, go for Copium. The reason for this is because, so if ever you try to set up a good board for the trap checks, they can easily be interrupted with a copy of Ash Blossom. Now, Imperm is one thing there that can stop the search for any cards, but don't Imperm the Serra, but instead Imperm the other monsters that is on the field. That is non-link or non-exe monster. Also, they fold under a maxi. They are not really good with back row removals, but I think they have a protection for the new support cards for the trap tricks. But even so, even the match is one thing there as well that can stop a trap tricks in its track. The best thing about trap tricks as well is with the new supports allows you to gain more advantage on the field or gain more field presence on the field as well. Having a Reflacia or even a copy of what was the other word? Pingokula on the field to gain you more advantage afterwards or during your opponent's turn. Also, the field spell is protects your monster from ever getting destroyed by battle. And then we have generators. Generators, I'm going to put this one in Copium as well. Copium because I have dealt with the generator deck actually. I haven't played generators, but I've dealt with them a couple of times, and it's just basically the same lineup. Summon a monster, use the field spell, then I just immediately remove the field spell or remove the monster. They can't go anything afterwards. Drop a maxi, gain you more advantage. Go for evenly match, wipe the board out. Easy as that. I've seen some other plays in YouTube where generators was really good. As long as you are not interrupted, they are really good. Then you have Evil Eye. Evil Eye, I'm going to put this one in Copium as well. So, like Dark Worlds, wherein RNG was a thing for your win con. So, Evil Eye is having equipped cards as your win condition as well. And of course, one monster on the field that relies mostly on that specific support for an equipped card, and some other back row cards that support just one monster on the board. But like I said, guys, having one monster on the board with an equipped spell is not really a good win condition as well. So that is why I'm going to put that one on a Copium tier. So that is basically it. A couple of S tiers, a couple of A tiers, and a couple of Copium decks as well. So tell me your thoughts on my tier list. But yeah, I really like to see your insights into this tier list. Tell me your thoughts, tell me your reactions. Just don't be rude. Anyways, that's me signing off. Keep safe, good luck, and that is it for tier list. I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.